Hi, Scott. Before we start, perhaps we can just ask your name and where you're from and your qualifications.
Sure. My name is Scott Wallace. I'm a scientist, educator, law student and animal rights activist, and I'm a Bachelor of Science with honours, majoring in marine ecology, and I'm about to start my thesis in a few months on Earth jurisprudence and some of the rights of nature, emerging ecological theories of law.
Thanks, Scott. So can we ask you to talk to us about the impact of industrial scale agricultural practices on livestock?
I'd just like to thank the Tribunal for the opportunity to represent the non-human members of the Earth community, non-human animals and other members of the Earth community here today. It's an absolute privilege and something that I do not take lightly. As we are all here today, we're representing the communities, the environment and the animals and the effects that our choices and consequences, laws and policies are having on them. And so I take today with great honour. I'd just like to before I continue, thank Martin Taylor for such a thorough, necessary and relieving analysis on the environmental impacts of the animal agriculture industry. I've experienced the suppression of information myself over the years as an independent researcher, and the animal agriculture industry is an ecological disaster, nothing less. So framing my analysis today, I'd like to start by talking about how human-centered culture and anthropocentric ideologies that have underpinned our society and our economic systems. But we've seen humans as separate from nature, as superior to nature, and as a result of this deep-rooted human-centeredness, we've seen animals as property, where sentient life forms are considered to be mere objects and not a community of subjects, as articulated by people like Thomas Berry. And so as a result of this property status of animals, the legal protections afforded to animals has reflected this. And so what we have, we've seen a welfarist approach in terms of the governing our relationship with animals. So there's a big difference between animal rights and animal welfare. The animal welfare legislation, which is the dominant paradigm within our policies and legislation. So you have the Animal Care and Protection Act, and this is based off that welfarist paradigm where animals are afforded various protections in terms of, free to exhibit natural behaviours, claim to be free from. Let me just get these right. So it's based off the 5 freedoms, the 5 Fs, and so this is the freedom from hunger and thirst, discomfort, pain, injury and disease, freedom to express normal behaviours, and freedom from fear and distress. Most notably and arguably the most important right that animals are not granted is a right to life under our current systems. And so from an animal rights perspective, this is something that we would argue is the most imperative right that should be granted to any member of the Earth community, human or non-human alike. So from this welfarist approach, I'd just like to bring the Tribunal's attention to the Animal Care and Protection Act, and I encourage you all to examine this. Section 3 is purposes of the Act, and it states the purposes of this Act are to do the following: promote the responsible care and use of animals. So our primary legislation in order to protect animals promotes the use of animals. So therefore we have a structure which enables the exploitation of animals to continue. And so the majority of our exploitation of animals is in the animal agriculture sector. And although I haven't found the specific numbers for the Brigalow Belt area, I'd like to discuss some of the more general facts and figures around the treatment, use of non-human animals here. And so the Act does claim to protect animals from unjustifiable, unnecessary or unreasonable pain, and there are a number of offence provisions where you cannot be cruel to animals, and there's offences for a breach of duty. However, the law we have in place is relatively speciesist, where depending on your membership to a particular species, you're afforded more protection than other animals. Unfortunately, livestock animals are afforded the least amount of protection in terms of our legislation and policy, whereas companion animals, which is what this Act really serves to protect, are afforded the highest level of protections. Interestingly, one thing that is not questioned is our consumption of animal products. Is it necessary? But this act does serve to balance the interest of humans and those industries that are dependent on the use of animals with the interests of animals themselves. And so there was, within our legislation, what we have is a number of exceptions. So it says there is an exemption for all these cruelty provisions if an industry code of practice is followed. And so for almost every industry that revolves around the use and exploitation of animals, there is an industry code of practice set up or it can be created to support that industry. Of course, the animal agriculture sector and livestock sector does have their own codes of practice in place. Now, very few of these are actually compulsory requirements. Some of these codes, such as the cattle code, are voluntary. The pig farming code, and I like to refer to as pig not pork because we like to use euphemisms to describe things that we may not necessarily feel comfortable about discussing. That code has some compulsory components, whereas the majority of it is voluntary. So we essentially have a law which seems quite strong, however, looking into the details, it allows immense amounts of suffering and harm to be inflicted on animals that, as members of the public and community, will expect to not be happening to animals. And this is something that really, really concerned me once I started exploring law and the industry. In Australia, so straight off the Australian Bureau of Statistics, in 3 months in Australia, between March to June, we slaughtered 170 million animals. This is 100 at least, okay? This is 170 million lives lost from sentient creatures who do not want to die. So in addition to the insane effects on wildlife from livestock and the clearing that we've seen, in addition to that 30, 40 odd billion, there is millions of animals that are being slaughtered each year. Globally, we're talking almost 60 billion land animals each year and the 2.5, 2.6 trillion fishes. These creatures are sentient and capable of experiencing a range of things we do as humans. So getting to some of the specifics of the livestock sector on animals. For example, there are provisions within the Animal Care and Protection Act which highlight that it is an offence to, say, cut the tail off a dog unless there's proper veterinary care, and this can attract fines up to $12,000. The same practices are completely legalised and supported within the animal agriculture sector. So we have a differentiation between some animals being more valuable and more morally important compared to others. And so I'd like to take this opportunity today to continue to be a voice for all members of the Earth community and get us questioning as a society, as a culture, and as questioning our governance systems. Do we want to continue with the use and exploitation of animals as a potential solution to this? We are experiencing the rise and increase of industries that are no longer revolving around the use and exploitation of animals. So in addition to Martin's solutions, I would advocate that the use of animals, and what we're seeing here, for example, in the dairy industry, male calves are taken from their mothers, often within hours of birth. They've been left to die from starvation or dehydration. They're sold by weight off a veal. The females are impregnated 4 to 5 times over and over. This is a very brutal cycle. It's something that has become normalised within our society and is an industry that I used to support as a consumer. There's documentaries such as Dominion, which have been released in the last year, which I would urge you all to explore, and members of the tribunal to consider the institutionalised and normalised suffering of animals within our society. The United Nations back in 2010 has been advocating for an urgent global shift towards a plant-based diet to address the worst impacts of climate change and a whole number of environmental harms. And so there was an article that Martin brought up which was focusing on, it said, something leaves the consumers as the only driver of change. I totally agree with this, although it's not only the grassroots momentum that leads to shifts in our world. It does take policy shifts, legislation shifts. However, the reason why the bricklayer belt is being destroyed is because consumers are demanding these products. We need to take responsibility for the destruction that is happening out there as a result of our choices, which are not our personal choice if there is a victim involved. So the use of animals is something that does need to be questioned. And looking back in terms of how the Indigenous mob were interacting with non-human animals, completely different to the way we are operating now. Hunting and killing animals is out of necessity, out of survival. We are no longer in a society where this needs to continue, and so questions must be asked about our role and contributions to unnecessary suffering. At the moment, the best reasons we have of farming livestock is because we like to consume the animal flesh. It's cultural justification, it's convenience justification, it's out of pleasure. And so today, I'd just like to get the tribunal and members of the community to consider if we think it's wrong to inflict unnecessary suffering on animals, then we must understand that's culture, convenience, taste and pleasure are not good enough excuses. We do have the power to change the world and influence the direction of our growth and our consciousness, and keeping animals off our plates and off our shoes and off our couches, I think is a very important step forward in terms of creating a world where it's ecologically just, it's just for humans, but it's also just for all members of the Earth community. Is that time? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Is there any questions from the panel, please?
I have a quick one. Thank you, Scott. It was a really excellent overview of these big picture issues around these industries. Do you feel personally encouraged by what I personally see as a really rapid rise in veganism and responses to very thoughtful eating and thinking about what we're doing?
Totally. I've experienced the inner transformation of culture myself. I'm looking at the stats across the globe. Veganism is the largest growing social justice movement, and so people are moving away from consuming animal products. And it's the vegan philosophy I really think ties in well with the principles of Earth jurisprudence, where we are looking at an ecocentric point of view. And the numbers of vegans are increasing, and this is going to be minimising the impacts on the animals and really minimising the ecological effects. And so that's a really bottom-up approach to challenging some of these issues, but it does take us going through challenging our cultural conditioning, challenging our society in some ways and going against the status quo. And I feel that this, as long as the industries want to seek a path of least resistance, metaphorically and literally, in terms of the animal agriculture sector, and the way we've been educated and brought up allows these industries to continue, because we are disconnected from the consequences of our choices.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Scott. I want to apologise to the 54 billion animals that I forgot off my $6 billion list. $6 billion list. You're right, it's just over 60.2 billion animals. That's the record. So, but in saying that, as you can see, I'm not a vegan as yet, but I'm happy to be convinced of that. And certainly my partner's doing that. And we see that often out where we live, a Volvo that has vegan written all over the side of it is parked in different locations. So it's convincing, it's starting to be convincing. Are there other techniques that you believe can be used to change your attitudes and behaviours?
I think it's about reconnecting, however that may be, to our core values of justice, compassion, respect. People hold these beliefs as human beings. However, actions have been out of alignment with that. So I think going through, however that may be, that process of self-evaluation, introspection, and really looking at us as individuals and the contributions we make to society can really help people move in that direction. And I think your mob back in the day were vegans, and here's my point. It's about minimising and avoiding animal products where practical possible. And so, it was out of necessity that you're out killing kangaroos, emus, whatever they may be. Another process could be looking through our conditioning of carnism, where we're conditioned to eat certain animals and see particular animals as more important. I would encourage everyone, just as the Indigenous people of Australia, the nation now known as Australia, had totems. Why don't we extend our totems to all Earth members? There's nothing stopping us from extending that respect to all animals.
Yeah, have a totem, I'd say. Have 2 or 3.
I believe it, right? Thanks, Ross.
Yes, sorry, no, Mary's got a question.
Well, just a comment really. I agree with everything you say, but I sort of have a difficulty with only looking at the right to life of animals and so on. I kind of thinking on a broader global scale of human societies where there's a whole lot of societies that are humans, especially the ones that are, always being invaded and bombed, like in Yemen, they have a right to life, and in the Philippines and various other countries. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to say that, and I know that's a bigger problem because it's to do with states, the smallest, because they are in charge, of course, on behalf of plutocracies, basically, the state everywhere, and while there might be wonderful, and it's quite right, there's movements of all sorts that we've heard most of the day now in trying to turn this around environmentally, ecologically, and so on. And it's good, it's right, but in the old days, our old days, it was sort of like you look after the land, and that becomes a template for the kind of society you have. So it's a relationist. But now, I think that thing is reversed, actually. That you have to look at what the modern sort of system is, which is pretty, I believe, uncivilized, actually. Where the state is in charge, they are an enabler of relations, the state. So you have to target them. And then sort of, I'm not saying in a linear way, and then look at this very broad, universal kind of thing of looking after. I'm not saying looking after land second or anything, I'm not saying that at all. I certainly wouldn't, But I don't know why we can't have something like that, stop making war. I know that, we all know there's been huge international protests of millions of people, and the state just simply ignored that. And the state just ignores whatever people say, no matter how well-meaning and strong, about anything to do with the environment. So I'm just thinking that it might be. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I'm talking off the top of my head. But anyway, what do you?
I've shared your sentiments, and I understand. Where do we focus our efforts, and how do we minimise suffering and injustice for everyone on the planet? A few things that I could pick up on. So I think one of the reasons why we continue to treat humans with so much disregard and violence, not us as individuals, but as a general society. It's because we are killing and slaughtering billions and billions and billions of animals in the same system that we used to put people into concentration camps. And so there's very clear links there. The philosophy of veganism is to promote non-violence towards oneself, towards other people, towards animals. And when we do have enough grain and food being grown around the world to feed people, but it's given to livestock, then we can also tackle human rights issues and poverty through this redistribution of these resources. We don't have a blueprint to how we do tackle and address these environmental issues, human rights issues, so it's about doing what we can with what we know to move forward and to continue our evolution. And so I think these issues need to be tackled concurrently, and the animal rights issues can really be addressed every day with the 3 meals we make and when we go purchase some shoes, choosing to not have cow skin on them. It's very simple as that. So I think massive efforts to address human rights issues and that side of justice, but this is something that I feel can be addressed very quickly if people are willing to go within and to put less reliance on governments to change the world. We all have been able to influence and change the direction of our society, and so we can do that together.
Thank you.